Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Mimi. In the previous video on VLOOKUP versus data modeling, where we established that we need to stop writing VLOOKUP and use data modeling, we were able to connect some of our data, the student table and the billing table. And in this video, we're just going to be taking a step further. We're going to be bringing in more data files and we'll be writing some formulas. So your business user or your business owner at your workplace, they might need you to answer some questions with data and you have to write some formulas. These formulas are called DAX, which is data analytics expression. So we'll be writing a few of them today in this video. So if you've not seen my previous video on VLOOKUP versus data modeling, you can head over to that video and pause this one because we're going to be using similar data from that video in this video. Alright, so let's get started. So in the last video on VLOOKUP versus data modeling, we brought in those two files here. Let's go see the data model. So we can go to data and go to this greenhouse. You can also get to it if you go to Power Pivot and you click this manage. You see it says data model. So I'm going to click that. And this will open Power Pivot for us. And we can see that if you go to diagram view, we still have those two files. Okay, now let's bring in two more files. So I'm going to close Power Pivot. And today we are going to be bringing in this library checkout. This one just has that, okay, for this checkout, somebody checked out this book 1062. It was this student 10063. They checked out on this day. They're supposed to bring it back on the 1st of January 27, and they actually brought it back the same day. So nothing is due. We're going to assume that for this so that we can write those calculations. For every day that a book is late, we're going to charge $5. Every day that a book is late, we'll charge $5. Also, we're going to bring in this advisor table here. This one just means that this advisor Opalin, the last name is this. She speaks Spanish and she's assigned to this major, computer science. That means all the students in computer science, she will be in charge of them. Okay, so now let's go back to that file that we've been working on and let's bring in those two files. So remember, we go to data and we go to text from text/CSV. Why? Because those two files, they are CSV files. So I'm going to click this and then this one, and it's going to be in the description box. So right now let's bring in the advisor first. I'll click import and this will just show us some of the data. I'll click transform data so that it can take us to Power Query. Okay, so now we see Power Query editor. Let's bring in the second one that has the checkout. So we're going to go to new source. We're going to go to file. We'll go to text/CSV. And now we can bring in this library checkout file and you click import. Okay, this is fine. We'll click OK. Okay, so let's just go through all this just to make sure it's fine. So anytime we see 1, 2, 3, we know that this is a whole number. So this means this is a whole number as well. The student ID is fine. The checkout date is a date. Sometimes it will be a date time. So now it's date, so we're fine. Due date is fine. And the return date, so is also a date, so we're fine. I'll go to advisor. So advisor here, the ID is O number, so that's fine. Let's change the name here. Let's, instead of first name, let's double click it and let's say advisor first name. Advisor first name. And click enter. And then let's change this to, you double click here and let's say advisor last name. These are all transformation that we need to do. Okay, the assigned major, everything is fine. So now we're ready to load this into Power Pivot. So we go here where it says close and load. we click this. We have two options. We already said that we have to go with the second option here so that we can specify where we want to load the data. So I'll click close and load to. And now we need to remember to check this box. This box just means that Excel is going to add those two files that we just added to the data model. So I'm going to click OK. And if you see here, it's trying to load those files. Okay, so now let's go to the data Power Pivot. So I'm going to go here, Power Pivot, and I'll click Manage. So this will open Power Pivot for us. Okay, now we look down here, and now we can see that we have the advisor file that we just brought in, and we have the library checkout as well. Okay, so now let's go to the diagram view. And let's expand this. And now, how do we connect this data? Let's start off with the advisor data set. We already said that their advisors are assigned based on the major. So this is the assigned major right here, and this is the major that the student is taking. So we can connect those two by dragging here to major. So Power Pivot created this relationship for us based on the major. This means that one advisor, we see here one advisor is assigned many students. Anytime we see this asterisk, it just means many or multiple. So when we want to read this, we'll say one advisor, because the one is here on the advisor side. One advisor has many or multiple students. Let's do for the library checkout. So I'm going to put this down here, and let's bring this one up here. I'm going to shrink this so we can see it. So library checkout, remember we said that library checkout, someone has to check out a book. The someone is the student. So that means that the student ID, we need to connect it with the student ID, not this one. Remember, this one is just a house for all the billing, all the money. It does not have anything to do really with the library checkout. We have to go through the students. So this is where the modeling comes in. So we know that this library checkout, we said that every student checks out a book. So we need to connect those two together. So I'm going to let go student ID to student ID. And this has created a one-to-many relationship. This means that one student can check out many or multiple books in the library. And if I put my cursor, we can see that they are related on the student ID. Okay, so now let's head back to the data view so that we can start writing the formulas. I'll go here where it says data view. Okay, and then let's start off with the advisor. We can see here that the advisor right now, we don't have an email address for the advisor. So let's create an email address for the advisor. Let's say that the school is jewelen.com, and we're going to combine the first name of the advisor with the last name at jewelen.com. So you just need to put your cursor here, the first one on the one that is not part of this one just means that you can add your new column here. So put your cursor here and click equals, type equals, and now we need to start writing the formula. So let's start up, we want it to be the first name. So let's type first. When you start typing, Power Pivot will bring you all the options. So I just type FIRS, and then it knows that all this has FIRS. So for me, I'm just going to click this. That's the first name. So we're going to use and. So anytime we use and acts at like something that combines, like concatenates, it brings together. So we're going to say the first name and the last name. Remember, we'll start typing last, and then we see it here. We're going to click it. Okay, so we have the first name and the last name. Now we want it to also include at jewelin.com. So we're going to put another and this time, because we need to add a text that we are coming up with, so you have to put it in a quote, double quote. So in that double quote, we type jewelin.com. So we'll say jewelin.com, and now we need to put the and at jewelin.com. So this means that advisor first name and put it together, advisor last name, and just include at jewelin.com. And now I'll click enter, and this will populate for all the advisor. So we can see now that Opalin went at jewelin.com, this at jewelin.com. So now that we have this right here, let's rename it. So I'm going to double click here. We know that this is the email address, so I'm going to type email address, and then let me put advisor email address. That way we know this is for the advisor, and then you click enter. So now we just wrote our first formula. This is called a calculated column in modeling. So it's also the same thing in Power BI. It's just a calculated column. Okay, so now that we have the email address of the advisor, let's just do a count of all of our advisor. So to do a count, we need to write a measure. You can say, what is a measure? Measure is just another form of calculation that you do in Power Pivot. We also have this in Power BI. And they might ask you in an interview, tell me the difference between a calculated column and a measure. Or sometimes they say calculated measure. A calculated column is doing it at a row context, meaning that it goes through each row one by one. If you have 10,000 rows, the calculation will be done on each row. But on a measure is a filter context, meaning that it depends on the filter that you pass in that it will do the calculation based on. Okay, so let's write our first measure. To write a measure in Excel Power Pivot, this is where the difference comes with Power BI. In Excel, you have to come to the bottom here. You see, we have all the spaces here to write a measure. You can write it wherever you want. So I just like to start at the corner here. So what do we want to do? We want to count all the advisor. We can see here that we have 6 of them, but we want a measure that tells us that. Okay, just imagine you have like 1,000. You're not going to be going through one by one. So to write a measure, put your cursor here and click it, and we're going to type the name. So the name is going to be count of advisor. Just start typing. When you start typing, you see it here. And for Excel Power Pivot, we have to put a column like this, and then you put equals, and then you can now start writing your formula. This is the difference between Power Pivot in Excel and Power Pivot in Power BI. In Power BI, we don't have to put this column, but in Excel we do. So we can now start typing. So remember to put your column and equal to. So what do we want to do? We want to count. So I'll start typing count, and when you start typing, it will bring out all this. So just click on count. So what do we want to count? We want to count their name. So we can count their first name. So first names, start typing. And then we don't want to count student first name because we want to count advisor, not student. So we have to click this first one. And then I'll just close the parentheses. So the formula is, this is just the name of the formula. We can give it any name that we want. Remember to put this column and equals and say count, and in parentheses put this and hit enter. And you give it a couple seconds, and you can see here that it says 6. So right now we have 6 advisors. Okay, so now let's go to our library checkout here. And remember we said that every time that a student is late to return a book, we want to charge them, for each day, we want to charge them $5. In order to do that, we want to know is this person here for this record, are they late? How do we know? we can tell based on the checkout date. Oh, and now let's remember to change this. You can see that the data type is date, but the format is showing with this 12 a.m. Let's remove that. We don't want it to show that format. We don't want the time. So let's click this. So now that we see the time is gone, let's do the same thing here. Let me expand this. We can see that this is showing that the 27th of January, 12 a.m. The date is the data type, but the format is showing the time component here. We don't want that. So let's change it here and say, I don't want the time. And then let's do it lastly for this guy. And let's say we don't want the time. Okay, now let's go back to what we were trying to do before that. Okay, how do we even know if this person was late? They checked the book out on this day. They are supposed to return it this day, but they return it this day. That means this person actually returned it the same day. This person, they're supposed to return it the 21st of September 2022, but they didn't bring it back until March 2023. So this person is actually really late. So we need to charge them. Okay, to do that, let's start off with how do we know if somebody's late? So let's put our cursor, click on this one. Let's find how many days is it after the due date that somebody returned the book. That would tell us how many days they were late. So to do that, I put my cursor here. I'll put equals. Remember, this is a calculated column. We just say equals. When we go to measure is where we need to put column and equals. For this one, it's just a calculated column, so we say equals. So what do we want? We want to know the date difference, like how many days between these two dates. So we're going to say that the return date. So start typing return date, and you can click tab on your computer, and then you can do minus due date, and then hit tab and click enter. Just give it a couple seconds. And now this is showing as a date. We don't want it to be a date. So we're going to go here where it says data type, and then we're going to say decimal. Okay, so that's what we want. So we can see here that this is 0. That is correct because they're supposed to bring it back on the 27, and they brought it back the same day. So that's good. And this one, if you check, it's going to be 169 days. This person, they brought it back the same day. So that's why this is 0. So this one is showing us how many days they were late. So we can rename this one right here. Instead of calculated column 1, we're going to double click this and say days days due, and we'll click enter. Okay, so now that we know that they were late for this many days, we can now charge them because remember we said it's going to be $5 per day. So let's put our cursor here and click it. So the next formula now, we need to multiply this by 5. So I'm going to click here and say equals. So with the days, start typing days due, click tab, days due, multiply by what? By $5. So I'm just going to type 5 and click enter. And just give it a couple of seconds. Okay, so now we can see that this person, we're not charging them because they were not late, so that's fine. This person, they actually, right now, they are owing us $845. So let's rename this to late fee, and let's click enter. Okay, now we know that this is a currency value, like it's money. So make sure you put your cursor on it and go here and just click this right here, and you can pick your currency. I'm going to click this dollar. Okay, so this person is owing $1,145. Okay, so now that we've done some calculated columns, let's do more measures. So remember, we can write our measures here, but let's start from the left here. Put your cursor, and now let's write a measure that would sum all the late fee. We want to know how much are the students owing us. So I'll put my cursor here and I'll start typing. So let's say total late fee. And remember, when we write measure in Power Pivot in Excel, we have to put a column and equals. So what do we want to do? We want to sum. So you start typing SUM, and now it's up here. You just click tab on your computer. So what do we want to sum? It's asking us, out of all these things here, what do you want to sum? For us, we want to sum the late fee. So we're going to type LA, and when we start typing, we see it here, late fee. Just double click it and come back here and close the parentheses. Remember, we opened this parentheses here and we need to close it here. And now click enter on your computer. And now we see it here, but we don't see everything. So you can drag, put your cursor here and drag this so that we can see everything. So right now it's telling us that all this fee right here, they sum up to $8,320. Right now we need to format this to show dollar. So we go here, just click it and click your currency and give it a couple seconds. So now we see it here, it's showing $8,320. Okay, so now the next thing is we want to actually count all of this checkout. How many checkouts do we have here? That way, when we try to do a pivot table, we can see, oh, the student check out this many times. So the next measure that we'll need to write here, put your cursor here and type it out. It's going to be count of checkout. Count of checkout. And remember, we put a column and then we put equals. And now we can start typing count. We see count, so we can hit tab on the computer. What do we want to count? We want to count this checkouts right here. So we can put checkout ID right here. So you can double click it and you can close it. So now we have count. We want to count the checkout, and now you can click enter. Okay, now we have this many checkouts here. And if we scroll all the way to the bottom, we can see that this is true. I see 55 and this is showing 55 as well. Okay, so the next thing that we want to do is we want to do a related field. A related field just means that, let's go back to the diagram here. We can see that this advisor table is related to the student. Why did I say that? Because they have a relationship. They are related. Okay. If I go back to the data view and go to the students, so to go to students, you click here where it says students. Right here, I see every information about the student, but I don't know who the advisor is. This first person is in economics, and we already know that the advisor in economics, if I go back to advisor here, the advisor for economics is this person, Kula. But we don't see it on the student. If I go back to the student, we don't see it here. So how do we see that? We want to be able to see for each student who the advisor is. So I'm going to put my cursor, I'm going to click here, and let's create this new column that will show us the advisor for each student right here on the student table. So I click here, I'm going to say equals. So there's a formula called related. We have another one called related table. Today we're going to be working on the related. The difference is that the related is going to bring one thing. One thing meaning a student here can have one advisor. If we have multiple, then we have to do a related table. And we're going to get to that in the advanced section. So let's click on related. So you can see now it's showing me everything from the advisor side. So what do we want? We want the advisor um, first name and the last name. So let's bring in the first name first, and let's close this. And if I click enter, we should see the name of the different advisor here. Say, because Broderick is assigned economics, we say everything here is economics. So we still, now we got to French. Now we see Chrissy. If we keep going to, now we see cleaning, we see Dahlia and stuff like, and then in Spanish is Franny. Okay. So now, because it's better to just have the full name in one column. So let's quickly bring in, instead of just showing the first name, let's have their full name in one column. What we can do is to edit this formula right now. So now that we already have the first name, what we just need to do is to put an ampersand. Remember, we want to concat, we want to combine. So what do we want to combine? We want the last name. So start typing. So we want the last name of the advisor. So remember, we have to use related. So related, and then when we put related, we can see the last name of the advisor right here. And I'm going to close the parentheses now, and we'll say enter. So now it's pushing the name, so we need to put a space here. So that means that here where we have the ampersand, we're fine. We just need to put a quote, and we need to put a space in the after the quote, and then another quote, and we need to put ampersand right here. So this is saying that after I have the first name, I want to have a space, and then I want to have the last name. And now you can click enter, and this should put a space between the first name and the last name. Now we can see that we have the spaces, and if we scroll down, we'll see that we have Chrissy Shuttle. So now let's rename this to the advisor full name. Advisor full name. Okay, so now that we have this, let's quickly go back to the library checkout here, and we already have the late fee. We already have the count of checkout. Let's do a measure that will show us how many of those checkouts are late. How many of the checkouts are late? So to do that, let's put our cursor here, and let's give it a name. So this would be late return. Late returns, and then remember we put a quote and we'll put equals. So late return, what do we want? This is where the calculate function comes in. So we start typing calculate. So calculate what? What do we want to calculate? It says it's asking for an expression. So expression is what? So what expression do we want? So we want to do count of checkouts. We already have this measure, so we're just going to type count of checkout. See right here, count of checkout. So I'm going to double click, I'll put a comma. So now this is asking us for a filter. Okay, we already have this count, but we don't want all those 55. We want just the late ones. So how do we know when some a return is late? We can use the days due. If the days due is more than 0, then we know that it was late based on the calculation that we've done earlier. So we can say the filter will be days due. So we can say comma and start typing days due right here. Click it, and you say greater than 0, and put your close the parentheses. So this just means that give me all the count of checkouts that have a due date that is greater than 0, meaning how many checkouts, how many returns were late. So I'm going to click enter, and we'll just give it some time, and we can see 18. So this is telling me that 18 of this were late. 18. So now that we have this, we can head back to our pivot table, and we can create some pivot table here to test this out. So I'm going to close this, This is showing an error. I'm just going to click refresh. Okay, everything is fine. So let's create another pivot table. So we go here where it says insert, and we say insert pivot table. Remember, we say data from model, and we just wanted to put it in a new sheet. Okay, so this is everything, but we just want to go to the active tab here. So we don't see anything. So let's go back to all, and let's bring all this thing in. So you right click and say show in active tab, and you do the same. So if I go back here now, we should see advisor. And let's go back here. We want to see all of them. So show in active tab, students, show in active tab, billing, show in active tab. So I go here. Now we should see all 4. Okay. So now let's just see for each student, let's see how many checkouts they have. So I'm going to drag student ID. I want to see their name. So students, let's see their first name. Let's see their last name. And now that we have this, let's see the how many checkouts that they've had. So let me drag this count of checkouts. You drag it here to value. So we can see some people 4, some people 1, some 8, some 1. So let's see how many of them were late. Let's see, late returns. This one have 2, this one have 1, this one has none. So this one is showing blank. If we wanted to show a 0 instead of blank, we can go back to the data model. So I'll go back to Power Pivot and go to manage. And in this return, we can say, okay, let's just add a 0. So right now we don't want it to show blank, so we can say plus 0. This just means I put 0 if it's blank. So I'm going to close this, and this should refresh. So now we see 0. Okay. Some students have not had any checkout as well. So we can change the measure, this measure here, count of checkout. We can actually do it here. If you just look for count of checkout, which is this one, we can edit the measure here instead of going to Power Pivot, and we can say count of checkout. Let's do the same thing and say plus 0. That's how we get a blank to show 0. So this should show 0. So this means that Sharona, she has never gone to the library to check out any book, and that means she wasn't late for any. Okay, so let's bring the fee, the late fee. We can also search here. Let's search for total late fee. So we can see here, this person is 405. So now that we have all this calculation, let's right click to make it look pretty a little bit. So let's go to pivot table options, and let's go to display. Let's click this box that say classic, and let's say okay. So this will make it fan out. Okay, now we can see that for Augustine, she's had 4 checkouts. She was late on 2, and she's owing the school this much. Okay, let's also add the advisor. We want to put the advisor. Let's say we want to send this to the person in charge of students. We want them to talk to the advisor for the student. So I'm going to search for, remember we already have the advisor name, advisor full name here on the student. So let's add that here too. After the student last name, let's put the advisor name. So this opening, okay, so now we can see that this is the advisor, this is the student, this is the advisor, and they can take this list and talk to the student from there. Remember to save your work, as we're going to be working on this file more for the advanced section.
That's it, friends. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've been able to learn one or two formulas like the count or sum. I'll see you in my next video.